Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Brad. Good morning, everyone.
So tell us, how are things at Uber?
I had a good ride in this morning with a very happy driver. He told me he's a correctional officer at San Quentin, and he's doing some extra hours in his off time so he can take his kids for a holiday. So,
Excellent. Well, before we look ahead, I just want to spend a moment on the year that you've just gone through. You've been at Google, you've been at Twitter, you have seen your share of corporate drama, but nothing like the last year at Uber. So tell us, what it was like and what you learned from everything that happened.
Yeah, you want to flash the headlines from the year? It has been quite a year, and I think at Uber everyone is looking forward to the holidays to take a little bit a breather as well. It also has been. What should I say? It has been eye-opening in many ways. I don't think in tech I haven't seen the hypergrowth we went through anywhere else. And there's just no playbook how you deal with that. And I think earlier this year, starting in February, some of it started to hit us. I'm like, we're not prepared for what's happening here. And it was a rough 10 months. The good news is, the fundamentals of our business is very solid. We have 2.5 million drivers who can make a living through Uber. We have over 60 million riders. The growth is fantastic. So the business side is great, but there's the human aspect, there's the product aspect, and I think the main focus on the human aspect, and you have seen this with, I'm sure we're going to talk about this, our 180 days of change for drivers.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. I mean, the problem was hypergrowth, but also, to put it delicately, there was some ethical corner cutting, perhaps. To ask you pointedly, did you agree that it was time for Travis to move on and for Uber to pursue a new CEO?
Every company goes through different phases, right? And what I can say is the company got to where it is right now with Travis, and now we're moving forward with Dara. I strongly believe Dara is the right guy to take this company to the next level.
What kind of impact has Dara had on the product team?
We actually had, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that. Yesterday we spent a couple hours actually on ML, machine learning with him, and we went very deep. He's actually deep in the technology. He has a technology background. He has a finance background. Clearly has run a public company for many years. So the impact he has is to take a real strategic approach. Let's not think week to week. Let's think year to year and what that means. So that actually has been fantastic.
How would you contrast his leadership with Travis's?
They're both interesting people. Let's put it that way. And I want to focus on Dara and working with him and really having a solid product foundation. I mean, that's my job.
Uber is still the largest ride-hailing company in the West, at least. Does scale matter anymore in this business? Do you derive any kind of product advantage from being big?
Yeah, scale actually matters a lot. It matters for riders, it matters for drivers. So for riders, the more cars there are, the lower your ETA, your wait time is, the lower the fares get.
Well, you say that, but as a Uber and a Lyft user, I don't necessarily feel like I see that.
Oh, I can tell you, it's in the data, absolutely. Maybe not in San Francisco, where there's so many folks here from both companies, but around the world, absolutely. If you wait early on, average wait times were 8 minutes, 10 minutes, right? Now they're here in the city, they're 2-3 minutes. Once it's 5 minutes, people are like, what? I have to wait 5 minutes? Are you kidding me? So no, it actually matters a lot. It matters even more so for drivers, because drivers, when you look about the life cycle of a trip, they have the wait time till they get a request, and they have to go pick up the rider, and then there's the trip time. Where really money is being made is only during the trip time. So the more cars are on the road, the more demand there is, the lower the wait time and the lower the pickup time. So it matters actually a lot.
Do you think that Uber riders understand how the route calculation works?
I think they understand, absolutely, they understand it better than it used to be in the past. In the past, there was always like, oh, it's a 2.5 surge. What does that mean, right? Today, you get a fare up front. I mean, you put in your destination, it tells you it's $6.85. You know exactly how much that is. It's $6.85, and you can make a decision. Is this the right thing for me at this time, or do I want to take an alternative transport method?
Well, the algorithm is obviously making calculations about that fare. And last year, you guys introduced something called route-based pricing. I've never really sort of understood in plain language what that is and why I'm charged what I am.
So it's actually pretty straightforward. So we're taking several variables into account when you look at a trip. Of course, current traffic patterns, which are very important. What route you're going to take, so how long is it going to take, and then also the conditions of the marketplace where you are right now. So how many riders are requesting a car right now, and how many drivers are in that area, plus the same thing at the destination. All those things together then create the fare. What's important for us is, and because every rider has a choice to take an Uber or not, is that you kind of create a consistency. Because if you take that $685 trip and tomorrow it's $12 and then the day afterwards it's $2, if there's no consistency to it, then it gets very tricky. And actually riders are like, they're using Uber less. So for us, it is a goal to have consistency in pricing. But there are special circumstances, and of course, dynamic pricing, right, that's the word, it is very, very important. Dynamic pricing allows you to create reliable rides because prices go up at a certain area, and some riders will say, you know what, I'm going to wait half an hour, I'm going to have another drink or whatever, and drivers are like, hey, prices are higher here, I'm going to go to that area. I mean, that's kind of part of the magic.
Well, on the driver's side, you have spent a lot of this 180 days of change on the driver's side, and I think every rider can tell you that drivers have been unhappy, or at least a vocal percentage of them. So tell us a little bit, what you can do in product to make their lives easier.
Yeah. So I think that has been a wake-up moment for the company this year. How we interact with drivers and what we do for drivers. As I mentioned, there's 2.5 million drivers who make a living on Uber. I was in India about 4 weeks ago. There's 450,000 drivers in India alone. I met with many of them, interviewed them, and they're like, we wouldn't have an alternative to make a living if it wasn't for Uber. And what we have done with the 180 days was the beginning, and of course it's not going to stop. We announced our Chapter 7 yesterday, and it went from different themes, from support, through preferences, through earnings. The first thing actually was around tipping. We announced in our first chapter was around tipping. We announced yesterday, I think, that over the last 6 months, folks have tipped over $200 million, which goes all straight to drivers. Drivers are now getting paid for long pickups, like if you live in the suburbs, drivers getting paid for that. They have 24/7 phone support. Yesterday we announced that drivers know better than many other folks what works and what doesn't work in a city or with the app. Now they can provide feedback in-app 24/7. We're doing twice a year a driver forum where we fly them into San Francisco and have sessions with them, what works and what doesn't work. So,
I did want to ask you a little bit more about tipping. So you said 200 million.
200 million, yeah.
Well, I mean, it feels a little bit amorphous. Are people tipping? Like, what percentage of riders are leaving a tip? Because we were kind of accustomed to not doing it for a very long time.
Are you tipping?
I'm not a frequent.
He's not. He's not.
You know what? That's not true. That's not true. I am, but I'm not a frequent Uber user at this point.
You're not?
I'm not. No.
I thought you wrote a book about Uber.
I did.
Yeah. We got to talk about that. No. So here's the thing with the tipping experience. I'm from Europe, I'm from Switzerland, and tipping there is very different than here in the US, right? In the US, my wife owns restaurants, and if you don't tip in a restaurant, people don't make enough for a living, right? And the reason it was quite controversial, should we do tipping or not? I actually think it's absolutely the right thing. In Europe, you tip if the service is extraordinary, and you tip up to 10% or so of whatever the meal or whatever service was provided to do. And it's not just the money, it's the human connection, it's the social connection, right? That driver this morning, when he told me, he's only doing Uber a few hours a week and he wants to take his kids for a holiday, of course I gave him $3, by the way. There was an option 1, 3, and 5. So of course I want to tip for that, absolutely.
Well, can you do something in the product to make tipping more visible?
Yes, we are. So We launched this a few months, 6 months ago, and we're experimenting with different ways of how we could even take it to the next level.
What does that look like?
Yeah, I could give you an example, and I'm not saying we're going to do that, but it's something we're looking at. Should there be auto tip, right? So Brad could just say always $5, so you never have to. You could answer comfortably to me, always yes, of course. So that's something, right? Right now, in the flow, when your trip is over, then you can tip. You cannot tip during the ride. Should you be able to tip during the ride? If you do that, you might feel uncomfortable as a rider because the driver might tell you, hey, are you tipping me or not? So there's the technology on one end, and then there's the human interactions on the other side. Yeah.
So driverless cars are obviously out in the future, but before we get there, how much innovation is left with the Uber product?
Oh, there's tons of innovation left. I don't know where to start. We're in the middle of 2018 planning, what we're going to do next year, and there's the theme we're having for this cycle is less is more. We have to do fewer things because there's so many ideas you could work on. I always say in this transportation space, ride-sharing space, we're like where the internet was in 94, 95.
Can you give us an example? What is left to be done?
It's like day one. I'm not going to reveal our roadmap, what we're working on, but you can. It starts with simple things, with the pickup experience. How often are you waiting at a corner and something goes wrong, right?
Well, but there are elements of that technology stack that you guys don't control. And now, of course, you worked at Maps at Google.
Yep.
So, what can Uber start to do more in-house? Are you working on Maps, for example, to make that pickup experience more accurate, more seamless?
It's not just Maps that ties into it. There's other things. For example, this year we announced that you can live chat in the app with the driver, which wasn't possible before. And in the US, of course, just texting, phone calls. That's not as simple in Brazil or India, to be honest. And our cancellations means if either the rider cancels and then the other side gets really upset, went dramatically down because now they can live chat in the app. Sounds simple, but it made a big difference. So there's things, and you ask about Maps. We launched earlier this year navigation in iOS and Android for drivers. So we're not commenting on what exactly we're working on or what we're not working on, but for example, navigation we built ourselves. Yeah.
Somehow we're running out of time. So I want to ask you, one of the criticisms over the last year at Uber was that it wasn't an equitable environment, that women were having a hard time at Uber, minorities. So I wanted to ask you what you're doing inside your own organization to improve that.
Yeah, I think actually that's what I mentioned before, hypergrowth. Hypergrowth is when you forget about the people. And you could say we just talked about the drivers, what we did for the drivers this year. And then internally, and I think we have made many statements, Leanne, who runs the HR department, who joined earlier this year, has helped tremendously. What that means is development, training, listening, etc. There wasn't much in the old days. There wasn't much manager training, for example, right? And now everyone is doing it. Everyone is doing it more than once a year. So there's a lot more happening on that front, yeah.
All right, underrated or overrated? Are you ready?
Sure.
Bitcoin.
Underrated.
Okay. Do you own any Bitcoin?
I don't.
AI?
Underrated.
Facebook?
Wow. Underrated.
And this is not on my list, but since you work there, I will ask you Twitter.
Overrated.
Okay. Autonomous vehicles.
It's because of me. Underrated.
Okay. Tesla?
Overrated.
Amazon?
Underrated.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
You should know. You
well,
wrote a book about
I wrote a book about that one too. I would agree with you there. Lyft.
That's not on your list.
It
right?
isn't. Well.
We don't comment on competitors.
Okay. And let me ask you, so Uber now is in what appears to be the final stages of a financing deal with SoftBank. What do you have a view on how that might change the opportunities that are ahead of the company?
This is when I can say I'm really happy to be the product guy and not the CEO or the finance guy. We'll see what happens. I think the right things are happening right now.
Yeah. Daniel Graf from Uber, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you.